Bored no more. Boom.
Boom.
What's going on?
That was lit.
Wasn't it? That's our dear friend Post Feed'em. He did that little clip. So we're gonna get everyone that was on the show today to send us their little vocals. You included, of course, Mr. Joseph Beard. So everyone, welcome Mr. Joseph Beard. I think you're pretty famous in the chats. You've been on the show before. How are you, sir?
I'm well. How are you doing?
Pretty good. Pretty good. Having an
It'd be hard to follow those other two up, man. You should have put me first.
No, dude, you're awesome, man. Everyone's been
follow either one of them, man. That's like a kid with playing Kumbaya, falling up like Eric Clapton or something.
Wait a minute. Wait, you don't trust us? You don't trust in how we put this all together?
I completely trust you. I just think they were both
just kidding.
Incredible.
I'm kidding.
Good.
For anyone who doesn't know who this guy is, who is this guy? That's you.
Is that a question for me?
Yeah, that's a question for you. Okay. You're Joseph Beard,
like
are you not?
Broad intro?
No. It's basically like so we wanted to have you on to talk about something that you're very passionate about, right? Yeah. And I think that one of the comments a lot of the comments that we got about you being on last time was your passion. It clearly shows, you exude it. It comes out of every orifice of your body that you're extremely passionate about. When you're passionate about things, it's like you really make it known. You really you put yourself in it completely. Is that safe to say?
Oh yeah. I'm like either neutral or fifth gear. Like it's all or nothing, you know?
Exactly.
So to answer your question, I mean, to build on the last time that I was on, I was talking about education, which dovetailed really well with Christina. And that was fabulous. By the way, if Christina's still in there, that was her ability to see behind the curtain was so good. There's so many things in there that I could unpack, but I was a public teacher for 18 years. And then come 2022, I put in my resignation and my wife and I started a coffee shop, Beard Brothers Coffee Shop. And so it was a completely unexpected turn. Like we were able to actually make it happen. Something we'd been dreaming about and trying to happen even pre-COVID times, if I'm able to say the word. And so it was something that we started to see the value in it. And I also could no longer believe in public education. I started to see the DNA of it. Mm-hmm. I realized that, I think I said maybe last time, to me, it felt like I was just doing triage on the Titanic. And we were like, we've got to do something different. I couldn't see myself continuing to do it for another 20 years. And so I had to make a decision, and coffee was the thing that we had been thinking about and praying about for quite a few years.
Mm-hmm. Well, it shows, like, from your Instagram page and conversations that we've had, that you do have a strong respect for the entire process of how coffee is made, it's grown, how it's roasted, and how you run a business. And I think it really comes across when I've talked to you. So ethics seems to be a big part of this, not only in your life before coffee, because clearly there was a lot of ethics involved in the whole schooling system. And it's interesting because you took that and you brought it with you, that passion, the ethics behind it, and why you're doing it. So speaking about, like, transitioning from being a teacher, moving into coffee, how did ethics fit into that equation? A, in your life, and B, in the process?
Okay, that's a really great question, and one that I could take some deep dives in lots of different areas, but
go for it.
The story actually began years before, even before coffee, and even before I was a teacher. My wife and I had started a kids clothing company. We called it Monkey Boy Clothing. Okay. And so basically we hired a bunch of local artists and tattoo artists and different people to make these, like, real wacky designs that kind of had this kind of crazy circus vibe to it. Mm-hmm. Hence the name Monkey Boy. It was just a kind of a fun thing that we did because our oldest son, Solomon, that was his little nickname. We called him Monkey Boy because he climbed around and everything.
Love it.
As we got into it, we knew what we wanted. And we were both also very cautious about health. Mm-hmm. Like, not only considering, like, what you consume, but even stuff like, you know, if you think about, I don't want to go too far down this, but even when we all wear stuff that's, you know, like what is it called? Like mixed materials. It's got, like, plastics, and we walk around with petroleum and such. So we wanted 100% cotton. We wanted it to be organic. And it had to be, you know, fair trade or something to where we knew what would happen with the sourcing of it. But the more we looked into it, the more we realized it's almost impossible. Mm-hmm. It's almost impossible to find textiles. And this is part of the thing that we'll talk about is when I talk about the ethics of coffee, I'm not just talking about the ethics of coffee. Yep. I'm talking about the responsibility as a consumer. So the ethics of coffee translates to the ethics of tea, to the ethics of chocolate, to the ethics of tobacco, to the ethics of cotton and textiles. And when you look at it, the textile industry, probably one of the worst, one of the dirtiest ones. Coffee is getting better. So to make a long story short, we started to look into it and realized, first of all, there are huge environmental problems. And what you often see in lots of cases is American companies will offload their dirty work to other countries that don't have like an EPA or something of that nature. Mm-hmm. And some corporations here will just poison the waters and just pay the fine or poison the soil and pay whatever fine the EPA gives them and just wrap it into the price. But a lot of them take it overseas. You know, look at Bulgaria, for example, and there's so much, their water table is pretty much just mercury and poison because of American companies that tout, you know, proper you know, practices. It's just all a shell game, you know. And so we realized that as we were looking into starting this clothing company, this is like, how can we actually make this happen? And we finally did. We found one line out of everything that we searched and made it happen. And we kind of spent all of our money. One of the lessons we learned is it never really took off because we spent all of our money trying to get it up and going and get the website going. And this was in 2003, 2002, 2003 that we got it started. And 2004, I think we went live with it. Well, part of my story was I moved to Turkey. We moved to Turkey as one of my teaching jobs, and I really couldn't do it there any longer. So we basically just closed up the business when we moved. Now, the way that relates is over the course of my time as a teacher, I was both a teacher of history and a teacher of English literature. Mm-hmm. And so I kept seeing there's like always a common thread through the things that I was teaching, which dealt with like, what are we doing? You know, like, what are we doing and why are we doing the things that we're doing? And so like, especially when I was teaching history classes and social studies classes and like middle school, it always went back to, you know, how is this impacting other people? Follow the chain. You know, how is this impacting everyone involved? And the reality is that we live in the 21st century, and we should not live in a zero-sum game. Nobody needs to be taken away from for anyone to advance. We could all establish systems so that everybody advances, but you don't see that. Mm-hmm. You know, I did one project I did was called the Deconstructed Big Mac, and the kids had to take something on like a Big Mac or a McDonald's or some fast food thing and particulate it out to the ingredients and answer the question, how can they still make profit by selling it so cheaply and yet also transporting it? Well, they realize it's actually so much cheaper to transport it. And it's not just about economics. And I don't want to go too down the economics train either, but what we started to discover was that everywhere you look at it, the things that we're buying, there's almost always someone being taken advantage of. There's almost always something being taken. You know, and I couldn't, in good conscience, you know, put money in the offering plate at church on Sunday and then go buy Nikes on Monday. You know, yeah. And so, and right in the middle of that, we were doing a unit, and the Rana Plaza situation happened. Do you remember that?
No.
Rana Plaza. It was in Bangladesh. I can't recall the year. I think it was 2012. But it was basically a huge building in Bangladesh, and it just collapsed. It wasn't from an earthquake or anything like that. It just collapsed and killed almost 3,000 people. Whoa. Which is, it was almost exactly the same amount as like on a 9/11. So, but partly about it. When they looked into it, there were lawsuits and things, and they looked into it, and ultimately it was a poorly built building that was built by a third party. But what were these people making? They're making all the clothes from all of the companies and the designers that we all know these names. If I said them, everybody would like, oh yeah, I probably own stuff from these companies. Right. And so I started to realize, like, how can we do this? Like, how can we continue to buy this stuff? You know, how can we continue to have, you know, how can I call myself a Christian and pay for coffee here or buy these shoes knowing that this is taking away from somebody else? Mm-hmm. And the problem is there's like an invisible barrier, you know, like there's like a line, and the line is oceans and it's political boundaries, you know? True. And so because people are so far away and you don't see, and all of the freedom of information or the labeling and such is also basically a shell game to keep people with feeling like this is a good product, feeling like they can buy it because they need to maintain that cycle, you know? Mm-hmm. So how that leads to coffee when we finally got around to when I realized there was no way for me to continue in education, we started to really pray into what this would look like. And coffee was the thing that I knew the best. It was the thing that I was most passionate about, and doors just started to open. And oddly enough, we basically said, okay, God, we've got two different ideas. You got to bring in money. If you bring in this much, we're going to start a coffee shop. If you bring in this much, it's going to bring that. And then if you don't bring anything, then we know that maybe we're up the wrong tree. Well, randomly, that amount of money, which was not a small amount, was gifted to us for no strings attached.
Wow.
Okay, it's clear where we're going to go, you know?
Okay.
And so that's when we started knocking on doors and pushing. And because we had the purpose, we got through all of the difficulties and the headaches and just made it happen. So when you ask what are the ethics of coffee, I think about a shot of espresso. You know, like I usually have a shot of espresso in my day, and like you could. I think it was on like one of the Royal Path or one of these recent ones I was listening to. They're talking about how you can particulate something out to the point of nothingness where it doesn't mean anything. Mm-hmm. And somebody might look at espresso and say like, oh, it's 98% water, 2%, particulated solids and all of that. But that's not what it is. When you look at that, what I see is that it is the soil that coffee was grown on.
Yep.
It was the generations of the people who worked that soil. It was the people who actually picked it, many of whom are migrant workers, each individual with their own story. But to us, they're invisible people. And so when it comes to me, it's already passed through certain hands, and it's incumbent upon me. I have to roast it as well as I can. Mm-hmm. I have to make that shot of espresso the absolute best I can, not because I want to be a coffee snob, but because it honors not only Christ, it honors the people that have made it. And this is not even just this kind of, high and mighty, lofty idea. You got to pay people. And so yes. Part of the ethics of it is one part of our goal is to build a network that we could build deep relationships with people and pay them really well, and do it ethically such that I know that they're going to get taken care of. I know that they're getting paid well. I could go there. I could go to any of our coffee providers. I could get on a plane right now and go see them. And there's a level of transparency and accountability, which is the element that's removed when you have other forms of other commodities, like why Rana Plaza happened. Mm-hmm. Well, there was no accountability and transparency. Mm-hmm. Yep. And when the lawsuit actually came through on some of those American corporations, their retort was, well, this third-party person who we were buying it from said that everything was okay. So they essentially just passed the buck down, which is kind of what typically happens. Of course. So that's kind of what we mean when we're talking about the ethics of coffee. It's like not only the thing itself, it represents something. Like it is a symbol in the Orthodox term of the meaning yes. that it is both something that is a literal important thing right there that is valuable, but it also represents something that's so much more. And if you don't understand that, then you don't get it, and then yep. and then at that point it becomes profit. If I was just trying to make a lot of profit, I would not go in the coffee business because it's a hard business to make a lot of money in.
Yeah, you brought up a lot of good points because I used to work for Lush, the handmade cosmetic company. I've mentioned it a couple times. Super crazy woke. But they, in terms of this kind of stuff, keeping things actually fair trade, actually supporting farmers, and actually going and making sure that they have a living and they have something to sustain their own lives, was a big part of what they did right. They did a lot of things wrong. So oftentimes, how they say, people go into something with good intentions, but it doesn't always turn out that way. And one thing I did learn from there that was positive from Lush, not many things, but one thing I definitely learned was to have a sustainable, that term that I want to use, mm-hmm. sustainable business, one that's fair trade and takes care of the farmers, everything that you just described for ethical purposes. It's also important to keep that business functioning, because without that business functioning, without you being able to keep your store open, you can't support those farmers you're trying to give them an ethical life. How do you kind of balance that? Because I know that's a difficult balancing act, and honestly, kudos to you for doing it, because you do seem to have a very successful business. How do you balance those two things? Because without you sustaining your business, you can't support them. Yeah,
that's a great question. And we've got and our small shop is only 1,500 square feet, but we've got 7 part-timers and 2 full-time employees, and we have the income to support that, as well as our own family. Mm-hmm. As far as the pricing of things go, people actually surprisingly don't look at that as much. But one thing that I noticed too is that if you don't approach things as if it is about the money and about the product, but approach it as it's about, here's an experience that you're giving them, then they're more willing to pay that. You're any good business like ours, it lives and dies by its regulars. And I'd say probably 80% of our income is from our regulars who come all the time. But they know when they walk in the door, whoever is there is going to say, hey, so-and-so, because that's one of the first things we tell them is learn people's names. You got to know their name. They're going to walk in and you're going to say, it's just like cheers, like Norm, everybody goes in and it's like, they know you come in and like, you're not getting a cup of coffee. You're not paying $7 for a latte. You're not buying, a muffin or whatever. You're getting an interaction of dignity, and that's like, you're getting part of community. They talk about the third place. You got your home and your workplace and your third place. A lot of people make it that. And so how do we balance the pricing and stuff? We basically have to price what makes sense. And then when you lead with excellence, people will come on board with that, I
love that. That's true.
And you actually, another thing too, without getting too deep in the weeds on it, you realize too, that stuff like things are expensive and it's expensive to turn a profit on things like that. And it is hard to balance between, are we charging too much or not enough?
Yep.
But when you've done it kind of like we've done it, where you pull out all of the stops, or all of the people in the middle, there's less people trying to get a cut. And so you can get a better product for the same or better price.
True.
So right now, coffee on the C market is at an all-time high. It's never been as high as it is right now. But our prices were locked in because we got them from the same source that we've always got them from. We've got a relationship with them. And so we've when we've paid them well, and I can call them up on the phone right now. And so that is different than if I've got to go through a system where there's like 10 people in the chain, Same thing. Anyone who can come to our store, we have a cook who's just phenomenal. It just has excellent food. But it's almost all of it is local farm,
nice.
There's lettuce, tomatoes, everything. But in most cases, the farmers actually come in and drop that stuff off themselves. Like the guy who literally picked it is the guy who brings it in. And so not only is it mineral dense, it's flavorful, and we charge a good price for it. And it's actually probably cheaper than if you go to Panera Bread or somewhere like that, and it's more healthy. Then people start to realize, okay, these people's values I can get on board with. So it is difficult to balance the pricing thing sometimes, but that's not what's important. It's the ethics of excellence, And every morning when we start the day, even if I'm not there, my manager does it. And if I am there, we all do it. We always pray that when we start it, we pray that we're serving Christ himself. Right. So, and I tell them that's like the standard that we have. It's like, you're not serving coffee to Perry or to Barb or to Susan. That's Christ coming in. Everyone is an image of Christ. I don't care if they have skittle hair or if they come in and they're a little old lady. That's the ethic of it. And so when people come in, everyone in the process, from the person who comes in looking for coffee to the person who grew it to the person that picked it, everybody can advance. Everyone can be welcomed in. Everyone can be part of the kingdom of God. And a lot of times they don't even know it.
I love that. See, I believe every word you said, and I believe that you are building these relationships, and I believe you do have these ethical standards because it shows the way you talk. Your face lights up. I could feel you from across the camera, how much you really mean those words, that it's about the experience, about building community, and the ethics will flow through all those things if those are your intentions. And to view everybody that comes through as as you're serving Christ, you're doing God's work. I think that's a really great point. I haven't released the episode I did with Father Christopher, and I can't wait to put it out, but that's something we talked about. And you actually nailed what we were talking about in that interview, that every little thing that we do out there is it's an offering to Christ. It's an offering to God. And it really comes through, brother. I could see it. I could feel it from you coming through. I love your passion for this. And I believe your intention is ethical from the beginning. You know why I say that? Because I've dealt with so many people through Lush and all that, where they say the words, but they don't mean them. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. They don't think that, because even the way you described having the shot of espresso, and you kind of thought of the chain that it takes to get that espresso to you into your hand, like you're thinking this whole thing through. Yeah. How do you look at things like some of the I guess they're like catchphrases, whatever, like something being organic or something being fair trade, all this stuff, because a lot of these places claim these things. How do you approach all that? Are those scams? Are they real? How do you approach all that?
That's a really good question. Let me take a step back to what you just said about some people would label themselves as such, and this will kind of go into it.
Sure.
To me, it's extremely important that I'm not using Christ as a marketing tool.
Bravo.
You know, I'm not going to use him as a way. He's too precious.
Yes.
To turn around and use him as something like, oh, look, we're a Christian company. I mean,
yes.
we're not shy about it. But we also don't beat people over the head with it. But I certainly don't use it as a marketing tool. And I've seen that a lot of times, you know, like if you're going to do something excellent, it's going to come across and people are going to come because it's excellent. And then you're going to have conversations with them and build relationships with them. And the excellence is what you lead with. You know, nobody wants to show up with get a slop cup of coffee. And you're like, oh, we're a Christian coffee shop. It's like, it becomes like mimicry. You know, it's just like the Christian music scene of the 80s and 90s. It was just like, what are you trying to mimic?
Yep.
You're supposed to be in line with the creator of the universe, and you can't even create something new.
Yep.
Yeah. Have a prophetic imagination and think of things differently. And so that's one thing, no matter what I do ever, if I get to the point that I use Christ as a marketing tool, I really need to stop. I need to check myself. And so you were talking, I think on Sunday, about checking your motivation. And it's something that I try to do all the time. I can't say that I've always been great at it, but that's important for everybody out there. You know, if you're putting something out there and you're going to attach God's name to it, that's a dangerous thing, because you're representing him. So you must show up with excellence. Better still, you just show up with excellence, and then he'll come up in the relationships. And if you're not good enough to maintain those relationships, then that takes you back to, you know. So the question that you ask about labeling and such, this is a deep dive we could really go down.
Yeah, go for it.
So I had someone not long ago come in and ask if we have, if our coffee's organic, right? And so you're not going to get a 30-second response when you ask me a question. And so the reality is, most of those labels, like when you go through the store, you'll see labels and they'll have certain labels on things: organic, fair trade, and coffee. Like there's Rainforest, Alliance and such. And most of those started with a good intent. They started with the right reason. In most cases, they were started as kind of like grassroots groups that were trying to do something for for health and transparency and such. In almost every case, they got hijacked by corporations and or governments. And so when I say, is it organic? Like, okay, well, one of them is and one of them isn't. But you got to think they both use the same practices. What does organic even mean? Does it mean that it's got a certification, or that it doesn't? So here's the problem with those labels. In most cases, they actually push people out, the same people they were intended to serve. Namely, the idea of organic is that the consumer is going to benefit, the environment benefits, and the farmer benefits by making healthier things. Fair trade, for example, is the same thing, and it's become completely hijacked. It really doesn't even mean anything anymore. And what's actually happened is that the people that, in order to get the certifications, those are really, really expensive. So with like organic, for example, you've got to have like a certain amount of years, like 3 years, depending on the crop, 3 to 7 years with no sprays or pesticides on it. And then also all of the people around you can't have chemicals or pesticides on it. But you can't control what your neighbor is going to do, especially if you're talking about a mountainous region in Chiapas, Mexico, or in Cerro Mogollon or somewhere like that. You're not going to have that. And so it puts them in a place where they really absolutely cannot get that organic label. So either they got to lie and fabricate it somehow, or they got to not have it and sell their coffee for a lower price. That defeats the purpose completely. So what do they actually do? How do you actually know? It doesn't really come to mean anything, you know? So what do? Well, what we've done is we have an actual direct trade network. And so we buy directly from the farms themselves. So that means that I know exactly what their methods are. So when someone says, is it organic? Well, I can tell you how they process it. They pick the beans, they ferment them, and then they use the fermentation from the cherry pulp at the base of the tree, like God intended in nature would actually do, to mimic nature. And then that's their fertilizer. But no, they don't have a certification, because they can't afford it, because it's also 300 acres or whatever, and not big enough of an operation. So the labels become really problematic, and the only way you can kind of subvert that is when it is the closer you get, and this is, I'm speaking to consumers because we're all consumers, where everyone buys stuff at some point, is to get the closer you can get to the source of it, the better it's going to be. So if you can grow your own food, grow your own food.
True.
If you can't, then buy it from your neighbors at a farmer's market, or buy it from the closer that you can. Obviously, we can't grow coffee in the U.S. other than Hawaii, but if you're not, find someone in your local neighborhood or community that is like us, who values that. Have the conversations with the owners and the workers, and you'll know quickly if that's what they really care about.
True.
And there's actually within coffee, there's a lot more groups and people that you would think that are really doing it well. Mm-hmm. If you ask, you'll start to see like, okay, there are some people out there. We're not just one-off. We're not the special, like the only ones doing it, but you have to know what to look for. And so the closer you get to direct trade, the better. Here's another one about the labels too. Even now there's started to become a direct trade label. Mm-hmm. And I was talking to my farmer in Nicaragua, and he said he was asking for us to pay, I think it was like 75% of our whole crop up front. That's a lot of money. And I asked him why that was. He said, well, we've got to pay the farmers so that they can do this and this and this. They had all these things they need to do. And he said, but if we can't pay them, then they got to go to their local, basically loan sharks.
Yep. It's like that in Mexico.
The loan sharks will take X amount of bags, X amount of percentage, a flat fee. Like they basically charge them over and over and over again to the point, but yet it's still direct trade.
Yep.
So whereas I came into this thinking like, oh, the evils are the corporations.
No,
it's not only that; it can be their neighbors too.
It can.
And so
we see really have Mexico. Sorry.
Yeah, you really have to nuance it down. I mean, and like I'm saying, this is coffee, and I've only experienced this in a handful of countries so far, as we're still relatively new. But it's the same in chocolate. It's the same in tea. It's the same in everything.
It is. That's one thing that I learned at Lush a lot, because they really focused on this, and that's actually something they did do really well. And now that I've moved to Mexico, I see it firsthand, because a lot of the farmers here, if someone's going to actually do exactly what you're talking about, they have to be able to pay up front so that they can make sure that farmer doesn't have to go do something, weird, right? Because there's a lot of that here. Because here, a big problem is avocados, because it's actually one of the biggest businesses for the cartel. Actually, most people don't know that now. And a lot of those farmers are having issues because of this, exactly what you're talking about. So to get them off that cartel teat, they require people to pay up front, so that they can ensure that farmer can pay for everything that he needs, including his family, and not have to make those dark decisions.
Yep. And you see the same thing in vanilla too.
Yeah,
like in Madagascar, that's a big problem as well.
Yeah.
To that point, one of our providers, and I'm not going to say who because I don't want to get anyone in trouble, but there are all these invisible stories when you start looking into it, and there's so many stories that need to be told. And I hope that I can establish a platform to tell those stories. But
you will,
guys. What he does is the cartels there are so bad. And he was just telling me, I talked to him on the phone a few weeks ago, and he was just saying that they had just shot in the streets like two National Guardsmen, just like, in broad daylight. But he was saying what he does is he pays his pickers, who are usually migrants, he pays them 60 kilos a pound, or 60 pesos a kilo to pick.
Yes.
Which is the same amount that they make if they're picking coca leaves for the cartel to be made into cocaine. Yep. So he's kind of silently subverting the cartel. He can't take them on head on, but he can like steal their workers without them even knowing it by paying them a better price to stay locally and not be put in danger.
And I know it firsthand here, because not necessarily only just with the cartel, but it's tough. It's tough in those countries. Like, and it's also, as Westerners, as people from first world countries, we think things are so easy. Like you could just go, oh, well, you just do this. I'm like, nah, things don't work like that. The politics are deep. And it gets intense. And sometimes it's not even just the corporations, as you mentioned. It's also like the actual environment that they're in. And I could tell you crazy stories here, but yeah, I'm sure you know lots of them, because you got your hands all over this subject.
Yeah. I mean, that's one I don't know what it's so deep that I could go down into this, but every single country has its own story.
Yeah.
Every country in the politics and the socioeconomics of every single country.
Yep.
When you get into it, and I'm just like, man, I'm just looking at coffee. How convoluted is it? Yep. So the question is, how do we actually combat that? Even something like this, for example, for like 20 years ago, Ethiopian Yirgacheffe was known as like, this is the greatest coffee. Like it was like, this was the standard. Well, Ethiopia is not always the most transparent country politically. And so Yirgacheffe is one of the many regions that you can get coffee from. There's a few different key regions, but it's like the region, because it's higher altitude. So what was happening is these neighboring farmers were bringing them into Yirgacheffe region and having them processed, or sometimes just having them labeled, stamped on the bag. So sometimes they were coming from like other areas that were cheaper, lesser quality beans. Sometimes it was Robusto, like slop beans, and sometimes it was from other countries too, like Tanzania. And so they rode on their reputation for about 10 years, but essentially the government of Ethiopia was in collusion with all of these people lying so that they could get that product to American markets. Like it's kind of how desperate they are. Even as of recent, since I started, we bought quite a few bags of Yirgacheffe, and one bag tasted like smoked cedar, and the other bag tasted like Meyer lemon rind. Same bag, same lot, two totally different flavor profiles. It's like, this is not the same coffee.
We used to see that a lot at Lush too, because we used to buy our cocoa butter. We used to buy our muru muru butter, our cupuaçu butter, all from like Brazil and all those. And we would find that from time to time. They would switch it on us because we would buy such a large amount. So what they started doing was they would actually go to those countries. Again, I'm not promoting Lush because a lot of stuff they do is not cool, but this is cool. They would go down and actually buy up property, like buy a farmland in like Brazil, let's say. And then what they would do is they would get all the farmers on there to work the land and then give the land to the farmers with the agreement that they supply them. And that way that farmer could maintain a living and know that the quality required was such and such. They would say, we need this type of product from you and we'll continue buying from you. But they originally would buy the land and give it to the farmers. And it was actually one of the very cool things that Lush did do to combat this kind of issue. Because I remember one time I opened up I don't know if anyone knows what muru muru is. It's a seed oil. It's like a butter oil. Let's call it kind of like cocoa butter. Okay. And then you would cut through it, and I was like, wait a minute, these are two separate blocks, and they melted them together. Okay. And we were paying like a lot of money for this. So they're doing exactly what you just described, but they were doing that with butter, and we just like, no, man, we can't have this. Also, the money that they take from the farmer to do this scam, it's immense. Like lots of villages, they just completely go obsolete because everyone can't continue supporting their families and this and that, and a lot of them die. Like it's to that degree in some of these countries. It's hardcore. Yeah. When you're dealing with money situations, it's like it becomes very, very difficult. And again, what do we do here? The best thing you can do is whatever it is that you're purchasing is to try to get it as close to the source as possible. But this is like kind of I guess part of my life's mission, and what I want to do is the things that I'm not able to do or to start, I want to encourage other people to do it. And again, one of the biggest ones is like t-shirts and tennis shoes. Like why can you not have, because in coffee it's relatively easy to go in and find actual real ethically traded coffee. Chocolate is kind of second to it, but then when you go to like t-shirts, right? I mean, people, like when you look at, I used to have my students do it, like we would have this thing and I was like, look at your shirt, look at the tag in your shirt. Where's it made? In almost every case, it was made in Central South Asia somewhere. Yes. Or South or Eastern Asia somewhere, Bangladesh, Vietnam, China, somewhere like that. And so not that in and of itself is necessarily, well, actually I'm contradicting myself. I think that in most cases you have to look at the context of it, but in most cases it is a case of somebody being taken advantage of. It's so what do we do? Yeah. Somewhere somebody's got to start doing like the same thing, like, and we call it like kingdom business. It's actually a term that I've started to hear recently as a kind of a trend, and it's kind of annoying, but it's the idea that like your business should reflect the kingdom of God all across the board, from every aspect of it. It should reflect principles of the kingdom. And so why do we not see that in t-shirts, or why do you not have tennis shoes but I don't know. You have companies that come along and kind of do it, like Tom's is kind of doing that somewhat for a little bit, but it seems like it almost always gets hijacked. It almost always gets bought up. And also people don't want to pay some of the higher prices. It's like the ethical phones. Remember the ethical phones were out for a while and they were like sourced ethically, but they cost like $5 bajillion. Yeah. And they didn't work as well as a Samsung phone or an Apple phone. I mean, it's a difficult, it's a big subject, and it's hard to, I think the way you're approaching it is one of the easiest ways to start. Is if you live in a place that you have local farmers that you can actually contact, and like you said, the farmer drops off the lettuce, let's say, or the local baker, he makes it homemade at home and then drops it off in your front door. That's kind of a lot easier to do than try to do it internationally. So I think thinking locally rather than globally at first is kind of the easiest way to go. I mean, we're thinking about that now here because we were talking about doing merch and how to go about it. We're actually trying to consider, like, can we do that here? Can we get shirts here and then send them out to you guys and this and that? And it's tough. It's tricky because like even the shipping and all that stuff, we're like, we don't even know if we're going to get it. It's like Mexico shipping. So, I mean, there's a lot of different layers here. So I want to say like kudos to you for being this passionate, to putting this amount of time and effort into figuring out how to best, provide service to your customer and do it in the name of Christ without jamming it down their throat, like you said, and sourcing things and creating relationships with a lot of the farmers. Because I know we've even talked about that privately, and that's something that you really take on. I think, what was the question, Manny? Someone was asking if you sell bags of right there. Can you see that?
Yeah.
So do you have an answer to that?
Yeah, our website right now is not capable of that, but it's been under work for quite a while, and it actually should roll out any day now. So there's a whole new revamp on the website, a completely new everything. And so the answer is shortly. beardbroscoffee.com, beardbroscoffee.com. And it should be very, very soon. So it'll be a completely new website, and on there you'll be able to get some of the coffees. And presently I'm the only roaster, so if you get it, then it'll be me roasting.
Awesome. It went through your hands. That's a big deal though. Like when you open up that bag, you're like Joseph Beard. Everything to do with this. No, seriously though. Like it's something that's important. And it's why someone would want to buy from you. You know what I'm saying? Like you do provide a service, an atmosphere, and an ethical code of high degree, which is, I think, good on you, brother. I appreciate what you're doing.
Yeah, it shouldn't be the exception. It should be the condition.
Agreed. 100%. Let's see if we can make some changes here. I think we can. We can all put our heads together as this little tiny community is growing, and I think we can do this. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, without a doubt.
Okay. Well, we're gonna wrap it up right here, my dear friend. I need you to plug your everything, anything you want to plug, and any final words or any thoughts you had on mind. And again, it's not a goodbye because we're gonna do this again.
Yeah. As far as the plug goes, I think that Manny put it in there. The beardbroscoffee.com. Probably the best way that you could support us is to, once that website is live, and I'll let you know as well. I mean, there's a website now, and it's nice. It's informational, but you can't purchase on there. So the best thing, if anybody wants to support us, is just to buy a coffee online once it's live. I'll let you know when it is live, and so you can send that information through your channels. Awesome. We also have the Instagram, Facebook. You can go on there. I do, like I said, last time we talked, I hope to start some podcasts soon to tell the stories of these people and let these people tell their own stories and give them a platform to do so. But I'll let you know when that's available. You asked the last kind of parting shot, the final thought is, I mean, some of the things I talk about are so big, and I don't assume that anyone's going to be able to go and start their own coffee shop or start a t-shirt company or something like that. But every single person can do something. And my call is for people to be critical consumers. And understand too that, like, you know, we're looking at 2024, and I'm not going to go too far down the election rabbit hole, but we all know that there's some chicanery, you know, going on there. And what I would implore people is, you already do vote.
Yes.
You vote every day.
Yep.
You go to Walmart, you're voting for Walmart. You go by, you know, any of these big box coffee shops, or, you know, a t-shirt or tennis shoes that is made in China or whatever, that's what you're voting for. You're putting your stamp of approval in there. So you give them $60 and then put $60 at church. Like, who are you feeding, really? You know, so I'm not trying to condemn anyone. I'm just saying, be a critical consumer, and let's all think about, like, the things that we're purchasing, what is the source of them? And if you're not really sure, we need to think about, like, where else can we get something like this, right? Food is the easiest one. You know, grow it, make it, find it. Other items like that, they're getting harder. And that's what I hope to encourage people to do. I hope to light a fire, to give a vision to people at some point. Other people who, you know, I hope that somewhere someone's going to like, I hope to open a door that's a doorway into other doors for someone in their mind, where they'll be like, oh, I'm going to start I'm going to start the shirt company, the fabric, the textiles, the tennis shoes or whatever. I'm going to do this same thing in tea or whatever it is, or whatever they might be doing. But I guess to come back down to planet Earth here, everybody consumes, everyone votes, and we vote every day with our dollar. So we need to be very cautious about what we're voting for and whose kingdom we contribute to.
Joseph, well put. I love talking to you, and will be a lot more conversations. We're going to push you on the podcast thing. I know you're a busy man, but when you have some time, I'm going to push you a little harder. And I think we can do something here, my dear friend. We have a lot of good plans that we're talking about privately and all that stuff. And when you have the coffee, the website going and you're able to ship whatever, let me know so we can also kind of put it as part of our podcast, that we can help you out that way too. Because that's what this is all about, is building that community and building the businesses that you're referring to. I think this is part of the parallel community and parallel society that we can build towards. It's a big part of what we're doing here at Bored No More. And it starts with supporting each other. It's also building with each other and building these businesses, these lines of communication, and a lot of the plans that we have coming. It's all based around all of this stuff. And my brother, I'm blessed to know you. Thank you for being part of the community, my dear friend. And we'll talk real soon, brother.
All right. Very good. Thank you.
Adios.
Hello, my name is Mr. Westford, and you're watching the Bored No More Network. Stick around.
Bored No More.